Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started, just want to make a quick announcement. This Sunday at 3 p.m., the Ellen Awards, which will be Ellen Award, which will be presented to Dan and Mary Bell. Wonderful at your clock, but please come and be there at the Opera House, 3 p.m. Okay, on your desk we have the minutes. We have a letter from the mayor, which I will read. I request, to whom it may concern, I request the attendance of any interested officials and citizens to his public, a public information session for the 33rd Bridge on Monday, October 29, 2018 at 6:30 in the community room of the Hudson Area Library. The mayor, the superintendent of public works, and representatives of Great Manning will present an update regarding various regulatory requirements as well as preliminary design. The public can view these documents on the city website. After the presentation, the panel will receive comments from officials and the public. First resolution. Commissioner of Deeds, Judith Bender, Christopher Philly, and Lauren Ricci. Can I have an introduction and a second? Juan. Second? John. Resolution number 2. This is a resolution to accept payment and issue a request for proposal for use of the public dock during the 2019 calendar year. As you may know, Hudson Cruises has used this dock up until now, but we're going to open up the bidding process for 2019, right? Yes?
Where is this coming from? This is not out of the committee.
This, I believe, is from the mayor's office.
Right.
Is that a problem?
Oh, yes.
Thanks, Ron.
And it's certainly not a problem, it's a good idea, but we had talked a little bit about not only just the big boats, but trying to set up a pay system for per night for the smaller boats along the docks.
Right, because right now the issue is that anyone just walks it in.
Right.
So we discussed this in finance and legal and DPW about how to monitor. I mean, so not that, I mean, this is great, but then I think we need, like, is this proposal going to include everything else, like the rest of the dock too?
I mean,
Right, the license would have to spell it out, correct?
right, I mean, this is just focused on the main, larger commercial area. I don't think it necessarily in conflict with anything that the council or the committees wanted to do relative to utilization.
So like finance and DPW want to continue like working on figuring out the rest of the dock, so we can just, obviously it doesn't impact it.
Right.
That's not what the RFP is trying to.
Right, yeah, it's just for that space that's been utilized by the Hudson Cruise Line.
Right.
An introduction in a second. Tiffany? Second? A resolution approving credits earned by firefighters pursuant to the length of service program. And you may recall, well actually Tiffany would be the only one who recalls, this was put into place a couple of years ago by the council. This is just providing a list of who qualifies for that retirement plan. Any questions? Council first. Any council questions? Heather?
Just curious, because I haven't seen it, does it also have the retro hours?
It does not, it just has the credit for the years.
Okay, so just so you're clear, because the city also agreed to pay out 5 years retroactively, we won't know, that you'll have to see another resolution for those amounts, and we won't know the total cost until we have both of them together. So that's all. Just
Actual hours. That's
yeah, so basically,
so we know, this is just telling us which years.
my understanding, well, that's what I'm asking you, but if that's just for
Only for the years.
years.
Yes.
Oh, so it does have the retroactive stuff in it then? Does it go back to 2012?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Have an introduction? Oh, sorry, call me
I
again.
just wanted to know how many names on the list.
Listen, 20.
26. And they're not all for all 5 years. Some have fewer. An introduction in a second? Rob? A resolution authorizing the conveyance of real property located at 255, 257 Columbia Street. This is the property on the corner. That used to be the club that was torn down in 2011 or 10, somewhere around there. And this authorizes the sale at the fair market value to the Hudson Islamic Center. Any questions? Comment? Yes, Mark. Identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Mark Morgan Perez. I'm a resident here in Hudson and serve on some of the boards here. I'm just wondering if there's an intended use for the property or if it's just going to be sold and perhaps not developed for a longer period of time, in which case it might make sense to get more money for it for the city.
The finance committee, you want to speak to that?
Well, this did go out to bid, and then I think, Heather, do you have the history of this property?
Sure.
I think you were here longer.
So the property was foreclosed upon. The club had to be demolished. Those amounts were added to the tax levy. The tax levy is currently roughly $85,000 to $90,000, including $26,000 of demo and interest and penalties from that period of time. It was offered up in auction in 2017, I'm going to say. There were no bids on it. Subsequently, 2 parties reached out expressing their interest in it. The Finance Committee decided to ask them basically for best and final offer. The highest offer came in from the Hudson Islamic Center for the 25 and change. The Finance Committee agreed to accept that and recommend it to the council.
It's that piece of property that's diagonal from the convenience store there on 3rd and Columbia. So with the little retaining wall, there's also National Grid equipment that sits on that piece of property. So it's not a very. It's actually.
I'm familiar with the location and the history of the property. It just seemed to be a key corner. I didn't know that there was National Grid equipment there. But it is a key corner, and it would just, I think, be a shame to see it. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was interrupting. I just think it would be a shame to see it, even though it would be going to a great new owner, for nothing to happen on it for more time.
Presumably, we didn't put any stipulations down, but
It's not an ideal piece of law.
do I have an introduction in a second? Ronald?
I was saying the piece of property is going for the money, right?
Yeah, it's
That's
going,
what buying.
yeah, it's going to some extent that I believe so far, like they're gonna, they need a parking space for the big building we're building most. And they need a lot of parking, so it's not enough parking space, so we're thinking about just putting a parking space over there.
Thank you.
The next resolution is accepting a donation on behalf of the Hudson Fire Department. This is $50 from Andrea and Bessie Gordon in honor of Tom Haig's 50 years of service to the City of Hudson Fire Department. Can I have an introduction on this with some questions? Tiffany and Rob? We have a resolution. The next resolution is a contribution to the Department of Youth on behalf, by Claudia Bruce and Linda Mussman for $800. Can I have an introduction, once those questions, an introduction in a second?
I have no introduction.
Introduction?
I just have a comment.
Okay.
I remember it was brought up, I believe it was the last meeting when someone was asking about community dinners. And they had to stop, so I think this is great. Thank you to both Claudia and Linda for this. So they can continue the atmosphere of family community dinners, including anyone else. Thank you.
As a problem. Our next, yes, Rob is the next resolution, as promised at our last meeting, this is to administer salary increases to all permanent part-time city employees, retroactive.
Who seconded the last?
Rob. This is to raise all city employees to $15 an hour retroactively. Do I have an introduction in a second? Tiffany and Sherry.
I support this resolution, but do we yet have from the committee that worked on the salary changes that we approved one set and now are considering this one, anything that begins to lay out a policy, how it's going to...
But it is on their agenda. I'm on the committee, and I know that's next. At this point, it was just catching up with these two resolutions. And, there's a lot we have to do to go move forward, because there are people who are already at 15 who have to get their, relative increases. Heather, you want to speak to this?
Just in that, if you read the resolution, there is at least a bit of a policy assumption in terms of the permanent part-timers, which is there's a step increase for every 5 years of service.
Yeah, I did see that. I did. I think it's a great service to have you folks working on this, and not something that's easy to do because it affects you, but something so that people would have a reasonable expectation when they're employed.
And importantly, so there's consistency across the
Right,
departments.
right.
Very important.
Right. And I think that big step was probably taken with ease, and now it's how to continue. A bigger one than has been
Yes,
taken.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You'll see that a portion of it came from the contingency budget that also increased the salary. The next resolution authorizes the transfer of funds between senior center accounts. They were incorrectly dispersed from senior grants and donation account for the utility expenses, and this just corrects that. Can I have any questions? Introduction in a second. Tiffany? The next resolution, the budget amendment to fund additional 2018 hospitalization expense. This is whereas the city provides healthcare coverage for its employees, and whereas actual expenditures are higher to date than budgeted, and whereas the projected 2018 costs indicate that there will be a shortfall in the healthcare expenditure line. So, not much we can do about this. It's a big hit, but we really don't have a choice.
So are we looking at 2 hits to the fund balance account here?
Actually, we're looking at 3 things. We're still within the limit from, the new resolution regarding the minimum that we passed. So we can't take much more. Question or introduction? And a second. Tiffany and Tricia. Okay, this one is a resolution authorizing a budget amendment to fund additional interest owed on the firehouse lease. The firehouse lease has excuse me? This is paid to CIDC Hudson House, and tonight, just for funsies, I looked into some of them. They are online, and it's listed. What's interesting is that their mission is to help government, to lessen the burdens of government, and they are a nonprofit. And you'd think with those 2 things in mind that we would have the ability to somehow renegotiate this lease. I don't know. Anybody want to pursue this in any way that you can think of? Eileen, were you around when this lease was drawn?
No. But I did try and understand it when I became treasurer. And if I remember correctly, CIDC was Bill Lowenstein.
It's Bill Lowenstein, Arthur Koenig, somebody named Lesnick, and a fourth person. I forget the name.
Okay.
The only person who seems to reside here right now is Arthur
Koenig, yeah. And I think Bill Lowenstein passed.
He's still listed on the website, but...
Yeah, well, I could be wrong about that. But as best I could understand it when I first began to look at it, it was a way of financing.
Right.
And
that's how they were helping ease the burden.
Yeah, and I don't know what was underneath those financials. I had no reason to think there was anything untoward, but it was, I think it's LIBOR plus something.
LIBOR plus 5.5.
Right, so in the 0 years, it was, turned out to be a good deal. Now as interest rates are going up, I can see where we would be getting a surprise, but I don't know, there wasn't an awful lot of...
They would profit as a non-profit.
Yeah.
Off of the city burden.
And I don't know that they do, I don't know that they do.
What?
Is that naive to say that?
I would say so, yes.
I mean, given the...
It was a one-time business structure set up to create the financing for this, which frankly, I think was not entirely legal at the time because the structure around how you could finance buildings like that changed in 1998, and this was done in 2004. So that begs the question as to whether or not, if it was an illegal deal to start with, whether it can be modified or changed. I'm also planning on talking to our bond counsel The agreement does allow for us to buy ourselves out of the agreement, but what I'm not sure about, because there are federal restrictions in terms of bonding and rebonding municipal things, it would be virtually impossible for us to buy us out of it without obviously financing it another way, and I'm not sure that's legal either. But I am planning on talking to our bond counsel about that once this wackiness is over. So,
Which wackiness?
this year, the rest of the year in the budget process.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, as I asked you in an email, and I knew it was kind of a silly question, what would happen if we didn't pay?
They would foreclose on the property and kick us out.
So, but they're an LLC that they're paying the interest to,
Right.
correct? That's the nonprofit, that's what,
A nonprofit. Well, I just throw that all out there so you know what we're spending all this money on.
And at no point do we own the,
Now, we do in like 2040, 2030. Heather, what's the year we take possession?
I want to say, well, give me a second. I think around 32.
what's the structure of their not-for-profit? Because they take money, but it depends on what they do with the money when they take it.
so
I invite you, I'll send you the website so you can explore it.
Well, they don't really take money, in terms of this at least, because the costs associated with the firehouse, so basically they created this organization and then they floated bonds. And specifically they floated multimodal bonds, which means that the interest rate changes every 30 days and then people buy and sell them. There's also a bunch of other expenses associated with it. There's lines of credit fees and a variety of other things, and a remarketing fee for the person who determines how to set the interest rate on the bonds. So
It's just an entity to hold the note, basically.
what's that?
It's an entity to hold the note that they created. What you're saying, they bond through this not-for-profit.
Yes, the non-for-profit sold bonds on the municipal marketplace to provide the money for the
Oh,
firehouse.
so these payments go to the bond.
Well, the payments technically go to,
So it's a pass-through.
to basically a bank that is managing the whole bond transaction market. So yeah, it doesn't get written out to CIDC Hudson House, it gets written out to Huntington Bank, technically.
Okay.
What's the next day?
An introduction in a second? Or more questions?
third hit to the fund balance
Correct.
for tonight. And so people are aware that we're looking at over $200,000 of unexpected expenses that, just this meeting.
Yep.
So over $200,000 of unexpected expenses for the city out of Tassman just this meeting.
An introduction in a second. Second? Second? Okay, that's the official business. That's enough. I think that was right, Heather, we haven't hit our limit on fund balance, correct?
It's not that easy to say, because basically until the end of the year, until we know how revenues versus expenses have come in, we won't know for sure. I will tell you that right now, in terms of the budget, there was already about $950,000 in use of fund balance, so this is going to take it up to almost 1.2 million. If we're lucky, we won't need the 400 and change that we used to balance the budget in 2018.
And there are smaller things like our own council budget that will go forward to them.
We should have got those new chairs.
I'm sorry, what?
We should have got those.
New chairs, those new chairs is really killing us.
We're not setting the entire council budget because Andy's doing both.
Any old business from the council first? Any new business from council first? Sure.
I don't know if this is the first, but it's the first time I've seen it. On October 19th, the Hudson High School is going to have a Hispanic Heritage Night. I think that is a wonderful thing. They have tickets that you can pre-order for only $1. October 19th is on a Friday, and it's from 5:30 to 7:30. So I encourage everyone to come out and enjoy the Hispanic Heritage Night.
Rich?
A few months ago, the city of Hudson, myself working with Craig Haig, we completed the 4 high-impact action items, which now means that the city of Hudson is a clean energy community. That I've been working with NYSERDA over the past few months through Economic Development Committee. So we're receiving a grant for about $35,000 because we've completed those actions. 2 of those were completed last year, 2 completed this year. That grant application has gone off to NYSERDA, and what we're looking to do with that money is do a light bulb exchange, which for residents, so you have incandescent lights, you can bring in your incandescent bulbs, and you get an LED bulb in exchange for that, as well as over $25,000 or so of solar panels, which location TBD to be determined, and that will help generate electricity for the city. So that will offset some cost. Not $200,000 worth, but some. There's that, as well as there's a tour of the cemetery, which is held by Kelly from Spotty's Earth, that will be on the Sunday, October 28th at noon. The library is sponsoring that, so please, the cemetery is an amazing space. Following that, I will be having a meeting in the room 2 days after, Tuesday here at the library, the 30th from 6 to 8. There will be a meeting here for anyone who is interested in helping to raise funds and help preserve and restore the cemetery, because currently we spend, I think, about $200,000 or $300,000 a year on the cemetery. And there probably are other ways of helping to maintain the cemetery, and especially even just some ideas such as sheep as opposed to lawnmowers being one of them. So anyway, and goats, sheep and goats are the future.
Yeah.
That's the theme.
I also, go ahead.
I just wanted to remind our council members to encourage your constituents who may have a need for help with their heating bill. The Columbia Opportunities have the program for heat that will help assist payment towards your heating bill because winter is coming, and the applications are in Columbia Opportunities, and the income has increased, so more people are eligible to apply.
And I want to report to the council that the DRI committee, which consists of the mayor, the treasurer, and myself, the planning board chair, and Andy, and Rob Perry, has met a number of times. We finalized more or less, close to finalizing our RFP for a project manager. I'd like to remind everyone, just for the sake of reminding everyone, that the city is only responsible for roughly $6.5 million of this project. The rest goes to private groups, individuals who are managing their own projects. We hope to have someone in place by the beginning of the year, and that person will then put out each individual project to contract, and hopefully it'll start moving in the spring. But I'll keep you posted. The public, or the mayor.
Thank you. Next Monday evening, 6 o'clock here at the library, that's in the room downstairs. I think it's the 15th of October, having a casual meeting with anybody interested in talking about a series of recreational things that are happening in the city. As many of you know, that we have agreed to a bike trail coming through Lower Hudson. Additionally, there's conversations about a North Bay Trail that's been going on for years. And we have, I'm going to be showing a couple of spaces possibly for an area that we could park bikes. I have a hospitality center for these trails, in addition to a much discussed dog park for the city of Hudson. So that's next Monday, 6 o'clock at the library downstairs. If you're interested in dog parks, please be there.
Carol,
You bring, I don't know if you can bring, yeah, I'm sure you can bring your
to the
dogs.
library?
Anyone else in the public? Nothing? Motion carried. All in favor?